more observant readers will recognise I am not Michael McCormick. Michael is online, but due to he's not feeling too well, he's asked you to chair the meeting. So what I'll do is just carry on. So again, I'll just make the normal opening statement. This meeting has been held remotely and also in person, and will be filmed and recorded live and subsequent broadcast again to the Council's website. The Council is a data controller under the General Data Protection Regulations and Data Protection Act 2019. We broadcast and record Council meetings to fulfil our public task obligations to enable members of the public to observe the democratic process. Data collected during the process will be obtained in accordance with the Council's published policies available through the Council's website. Members of the Council are reminded that they should follow the Council's established meeting protocols, including the use of the chat facility, and the comments made in the chat facility are visible to all participants in the meeting, which may include members of the public who have also received information. So with that, can I move to apologies, substitutions and declarations of interest, and then the roll count?
And we have an apology from Councillor Nelson, who will be substituted by Councillor Law. Move to a roll call. Can the following councillors please indicate if they're present at the meeting? Councillor Brooks.
Chamber.
Councillor Cassidy.
Present in the chamber.
Councillor Clockery.
Present in the chamber.
Councillor Crowther.
Present in chamber.
Councillor Curley.
Present in chamber.
Councillor Jackson.
I'm in the chamber.
Councillor Law.
Present remotely.
Councillor McCabe.
Present remotely.
Councillor McCormick.
Present remotely.
Councillor Quinn.
Present remotely.
Councillor Robertson.
Present in the chamber.
Are there any declarations of interest?
Yeah.
James?
Yeah, so it's a connection that item number 4, council appointment to the Riverbank Homes Board, but I don't believe it's supposed to be a complete private decision. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Chris?
Yes, I'd like to make a similar declaration to Councillor Brooks regarding agenda item number 4, with the ship being an Riverside Council appointed to the Board of Riverside Homes. I don't believe it will be making any decisions today. Regarding expected agenda item number 5, landlord registration update. By reason of being a landlord of residential property in Inverclyde area. However, I've applied the objective test and I do not consider having an interest to declare because this report is not concerned with any specific landlords or properties and instead considers the overall arrangements the council has for the regulation of private landlords.
Thank you, Chris. Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I have a connection to item 14 in the agenda by reason of a relative on the board of one of the organisations mentioned in the report. I've applied objective tests and don't consider that I have any interest to declare because this is an update report for noting and the organisation is not the subject of any specific officer comment, share or recommendation.
John?
Thank you, convener. Just to let you know, I've applied the objective test to item number 19, which actually is new business, and it's just that to do with the Fancy Farm Tenants Hall. The applicant for that property, I had been in contact with them and had given advice on what property had been available in Inverclyde. That property also included Fancy Farm Tenants Hall. I then passed everything on to our legal department and took no further part. So it's just to make that declaration to ensure that I am can proceed further on that. Thank you.
Right, so you feel as if you've done the objective test? And
Yes.
Right, that's fine, John. Okay, any other declarations of interest? Can I just actually also under the landlord registration? Now, I think I'm still registered as a landlord. However, my son's lived in my building for I can't remember how long. So, but I think I'm still registered. So, no, not the text. Oh, so I'll declare just in case anybody then looks and says, hold on, he's still registered. I mean, get myself off it. So with that, we have got a few extra papers and there's an opening statement that I want me to sell. But before we go on, I would like to hand over to our new corporate director. Congratulations, Stuart. And ask you to introduce the perhaps talk about the link papers.
Vice Convener, through you, I have to apologise for the issuing of a number of reports, including those here that were speaking in me this morning. There has been a lot going on involving third parties and external advice, exacerbated by illness and the holiday period. And for that, members, I'm sorry. Convener would also seek your agreement for inclusion of the urgent report in respect of the flooding, which has been issued as part of the papers today. The timing of the flood events referred to in the report was such that officers were not able to include this in the agenda when the following notice was issued. However, the nature of those events and their impacts is such that it is appropriate that officers provide members with a report on the same at the earliest opportunity. That being this meeting, I therefore invite the convener to rule that on this basis, this report may be considered by the committee as an urgent matter in terms of the standing orders.
Thank you, Stuart, and it's my intention to do that. So it's my intention to take the flooding report as item number 1 before they go into the main bit. And just before I invite you to talk to the report, can I just, and I know that the convener is very keen on this, can I just pass on my thanks to all the workers that have worked tirelessly, some of them for 24 hours. If we think on it, we were due to get extremely cold weather. We had all our staff out gritting. It then turned out to be a deluge. Those same staff then worked tirelessly to try and keep our roads and waterways and pathways open. So before Gail goes on to a paper, can I ask her to please thank all the staff involved, and I'm sure it goes for all members of the committee to pass on that thanks to them, because we do know in these very trying times, and we can even see with the weather today, how difficult it has been with the last 2 weeks, even longer with the weather. So with that in mind, can I invite Gail to talk specifically about the flooding event in the 30th. Okay.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your kind words. I'll make sure that the operatives are aware of that, and I'm sure they'll appreciate the sentence. The report sets out the actions undertaken on the event of the 30th of December. It sets out the number of roads that were affected, some of which were local authority roads, some of which were Transport Scotland roads. However, in both occasions and both types of locations, our road service supported the reopening of those roads. It also sets out the fact that our liaison in sub-contingency service provided the support and liaison with Police Scotland and other stakeholders to ensure that we were looking at this in a cohesive manner for the whole of Inverclyde, and the fact that the Civil Resilience Management Group considered whether it was required to stand up at various points during the day, and the decision was made that it was not required due to the fact that actions were well underway and the weather conditions were improving. So the report also sets out a number of the locations that were affected due to blocking with debris, and we also had a number of abandoned cars. So we issued additional social media requests to move those vehicles because that was causing some difficulty for further clearance. So we will ensure moving forward that we work closely with Transport Scotland and our social media and communications team to ensure that that message is made public to as many people as possible, so that any kind of repair and remedial work is not affected. I'm happy to take any questions on any of the events that's set out in the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Gail. First question is from Councillor McCabe. Stephen?
Thanks, Jim. It's useful to get this report, and I thank officers for pulling it together and bringing this before us today, and I absolutely associate with myself with your own remarks, Jim, commending our staff for all the hard work they put in to deal with this incident. I mean, there has been obviously some criticism of the council, and in some way we should have either responded better or we should have been taking more preventive action in advance. I think it is fair to point out to people that there was flooding all over the country, and arguably there was greater problems in other areas than that they were in Inverclyde. But there's no doubt that the area was affected by this flooding, and it's important to understand the circumstances here. But I think it's equally important to understand any lessons that we might want to learn from that. We have invested a lot of money in flooding measures over the previous years, and I think it would be useful maybe to get a more sort of detailed update report on our flood action plan, where we are with that, how the measures that we've put in place have been working, and where we still need to invest. We know obviously the major project on the A8 is kicking off. There's a couple of projects that are mentioned in the capital programme today. There has been other projects where the funding has been put on hold. So I just think we need to maybe get an update report on our flooding strategy, and where we are and what further action we need to take. Clearly, as part of that, we want to think about preventative maintenance. Are we being proactive enough in terms of making sure gullies are cleared and etc. So I just think we always have to reflect in incidents like this and think, can we learn lessons, and can we be better prepared for the future as well. And I know there are longer term issues associated with climate change that we need to obviously be aware of, and that might need us to look at further measures. But I think maybe it is time to have a more detailed report on our actual flooding strategy, so that we know where we are with that and what further action and further investment we might need to make.
Thanks, Stephen. I'll let Gail comment, and I'll take your suggestion on when we're discussing the recommendations. Gail.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Chair. In relation to a flooding update report, we are looking at our plans for the year ahead, and it may be appropriate that as part of those plans for the year ahead, we bring a paper that shares with members the plans in relation to flooding. We can also provide an update on our surface water management plan and progress with that, and work we're doing in liaison with partners such as Scottish Water.
Thanks, Gail. I'll bring Graham in then. Colin, Graham.
Thanks very much. Can I associate myself with the thanks that's gone out? Because obviously quite clearly the teams have worked hard on the day in the weather, but even subsequently there's been a really good response to gully cleaning on requests from elected members or members of the public. So just to give that thanks on to ensure that it's the ongoing support of the debris that the floods caused. One question maybe I have for Gail is, a lot of the gullies were filled up by soil or debris washed from private lands, and then we've got the householders complaining that our gullies are full. So there's obviously a balance here. I just wonder if there's any advice, I don't know whether it's here today or even on social media. So, how can we encourage members of the public to ensure that it's not their problem, sorry, their debris is not causing our problem?
Gail.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. I think I'll have to take some advice on that. In relation to water coming off private land, there is a responsibility under the Roads Act that landowners deal with their water on their land rather than coming off the public road. I'm not entirely sure in relation to any kind of debris and what powers we have in relation to that, but I'll take it on back to the team and we'll have a consideration of that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Colin.
Thanks, Jim, and again, I want to associate myself with the comments made. Just in relation to Kilmacolm Road, I don't know if members are aware, but there are 5 families were put out of their homes. They're going to be in a Gantic Hotel for the next 6 months. So it's really just to ask, have we engaged with Network Rail, whose land joins on there, or the housing associations, to see if they've made any preparations for any future flooding? It doesn't seem as if the social landlords were as proactive as the council. So just ask that question, Gail, for any future communication.
I'll bring Stuart in first, if you see his engine for it, and then I'll bring Gail in. Stuart.
You can give it. Yes, Councillor, we have engaged with Network Rail in respect of the recovery phase of the the exercise, but we want to go further than that and learn from the exercise that has, or from the event that's just occurred. So clearly, going back to Councillor Brooks' comment about the amount of material that moved, there were 4-foot long trunks that were 10 inches thick that came down off Mountain Glen. There were 15-foot long branches which they contributed to the blockages in respect of the crash screens on the burn itself. So yes, we've engaged as part of the recovery process, but we need to learn further from it. So looking at how do we contain water in the event that it gets beyond this, but it was an extreme event.
Okay, thanks, Stuart.
Okay. Any other questions? Chris?
Yeah, I think it's just this. I agree. I'd like to associate myself with comments regarding the staff who had to work extremely hard on the day, and there's a lot of work going up to preparation of these events, because I certainly have seen the street cleaning and the gully cleaning in the autumn time in preparation for the flooding events. So that has happened, and also there's the cleaning of the screens, etc. But also there has been a lot of money spent by the council on flood prevention measures, and I'm very happy to see that the good news with respect to the Cartsman Street and Crescent Street, which I think was quite an innovative solution by the engineers of the council to come up with a solution that enables where there's a lot of water to develop an alternative route for the water. And I think that's probably something that we can look at on other locations, because certainly I think we need to be a bit more agile how we deal with it and make the network more robust. With the ongoing climate emergency, we are going to see a lot more of these events. It's going to become the new normal, really. When the air gets warmer, holds more water, and we're going to get more water coming down quicker and at greater intensity, and these flash flood events will happen. So it's great that we've actually been able to do this, but unfortunately we're probably running a little bit to stand still, but we need to make sure we keep on top of it and try to improve matters as best we can. But I'd like to associate myself again with the comments on the staff who worked on the day and did a valiant effort to get and like moving again.
Thanks for that, Chris, and I'm sure that people of Greenock and the climate delighted to know that they've got more rain to look forward to. We could blame climate change for that. So can we go to the recommendations? Can we agree the recommendations, but add a further recommendation from Councillor McCabe's comments with regard to an overall paper, and then with regard to the flooding and our what we've done so far and what we're going to do, just an all-encompassing report on the flooding. If that's okay, Steve?
Yeah, Jim, thanks for that. I'm fine with that.
Okay, thanks. And we move on to the agenda, if we can agree with the
Yes,
we move on to the agenda properly, and we go to agenda item number 2, which is the revenue budget. And can I ask Mark to introduce it, Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Convener. This is the normal revenue monitor report for the committee up to 31st October. The main position is shown at 1.3, where I'm pleased to say that we are now reporting an underspend in the committee of £132,000. That's an improvement of £169,000 from the small overspend we'd previously been reporting. The main reason for it is really an increase in turnover, offset partly by income. The main movements in the committee are shown at 3.3 and also in the appendices. I wouldn't intend to go through them in any detail, but I'm more than happy to take any questions if I can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I'll open up to questions. Can't see any in the chambers. Can't see any online. Can we agree the recommendation?
Agreed.
And can we move to agenda item number 3, which is the capital progress? Now, at the end of this item, I'll probably put that request in, so just to alert members of that before the main budget report first. Eddie?
Thanks, Convener. I think between myself and Gail, I don't have anything to add specifically on the project updates within the report. As normal, a number of the projects have moved on since the report was written, but we're happy to answer any questions where we can on individual projects.
Okay, thank you. Have we got any questions on individual projects? Can't see anything.
Sorry.
Lynn. Councillor Quinn.
Yeah, thanks. I'd appreciate an update on the St Ninian's School site. Clearly, there was reports in the Greenock Telegraph, which seems to be further on than what's in the report. which is a bit concerning. So I was just looking for an update on that. And then under 3.15, I'm just looking for a timescale on the Larkfield Road, George Road junction, because that has been going on some time. So I'm looking to maybe firm up in a timescale for that one as well. Thanks.
Gail,
Yeah, I think the first. Oh, sorry.
By all means, if you go first, then I'll bring Gail in.
Okay, thanks. I'll take the first one on the St Ninians site. We are awaiting the final reports from the work that was undertaken there, and I haven't seen that final version. But as I understand it, there's no concern around the mine shaft itself. It appears to be adequately capped. But as I say, we're awaiting the final report on that, and that will then allow Gail and her team to move forward with looking at proposals for the site and the remaining funding.
Right, thank you, Eddie. Gail, do you want to just come in on the Larkfield Road?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. In relation to Larkfield Road and George Road, there's 4 schemes that are being looked at, and there's some detailed design underway that will allow us to take this to public consultation for a preferred scheme. It's likely that public consultation will probably be at the early summer, but I'm happy to get more of an update and a firmed update that I can share with you, Councillor, if that's okay.
Lynn, is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. It just seems to be drifting, so it's just to put on my record my concern that it's had quite a huge drift on this for some time now. So I'm getting concerned, and obviously the residents are clearly wanting a solution there. So yeah, I'm just expressing my concern there that it has seemed to be dragging on a bit.
Right. Thanks, Lynn. Can I bring Councillor Kirby first?
Right, thank you. I think just on some specific projects, I didn't know if it's going to just be Eddie's project, or if it's going to be Gail's project. So I'll just get a couple of comments on the Roads and Environmental Services core programme. Just like to obviously welcome the cycle storage installations that are now complete with respect to that. And I notice there's quite a lot of items here with respect to active travel, and I've asked in the past if it's possible to have a briefing. I wonder if officers would be able to advise when that briefing would occur. Gail?
Thank you, Councillor, through you, Chair. Yes, officers are looking at available rates, and we'll get that briefing scheduled, and that will be looking at the sort of active travel plans and what the key projects may be. There's a number of funding opportunities, and we're keen to ensure that we're in a position that we're able to take advantage of those, but we would like to share those with the members in advance.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's important because these are a lot of new bits of infrastructure that are coming into our life as well. In the chamber, we may have slightly different views on this, but I think it's important we all have an idea, a good clarity of what's going on, and we can actually move forward on that. Just on another matter, you're hovering over the buttons. You want to come in? Sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
You can hear it. What I was going to say, Councillor Curley, is we'll endeavour to get the all-member briefing in the next 4 or so weeks in order that simultaneously recognising that Gail was looking to maximise external funding. This is important that you, as members, are aware of what the proposals are as early as you possibly can, so that you can provide that level of scrutiny that's required.
Thank you. And feedback. Okay. I just on the item 3.16, Home Car Park. I think this has been a similar item for a number of reports. I was just wondering when officers would think they'd be able to share the details of the proposals of the options with board members and maybe the wider elected members.
Gail?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. This is one that's we did look to procure. We weren't successful, so we're looking to procure again. And I'll get an update of that from the team and come back to you with the date.
It's really just to get an idea of what officers actually are proposing here, because I think it's a good opportunity to sort of develop these things in Kilmco.
Okay. Can I bring Councillor McCabe in, Stephen?
Yeah, thanks, Graham. I thought my ward colleague was going to steal my question on 316, but he didn't really ask the question that I'm going to ask. So I'll still ask my question. But first, could I come in 310, the flood risk management? This follows on a wee bit from the previous discussion we had. it's good to see that the works at Glen Moston are complete, and I did actually go up there to see the completed works, and potentially it might have helped prevent the flooding in the centre of Kilmacombe on the 30th of December, but certainly hopefully it will be a measure that will have a positive long-term effect. It would be useful to know when the Gotters Water works is going to be completed. Secondly, in respect to 3.16, I was more wanting to understand the process we're proposing to go through. So tender documents are being produced, but there hasn't been any decision over which of these two sites is the preferred site. We don't own, I believe, the site for the old police station, behind the old police station, and I'm not convinced I think there's an allocation of funding yet being set aside for this project. So it's just to understand, we produce tender documents, how do we then establish the costs of the different options and then evaluate the options and then make a decision? So it would be useful to understand the process we're going to go through on that. And the last point, you'll be pleased to know, conveners in 3.33 with regard to town and village centres place-based funding. It would be useful for the next meeting of the committee if we could maybe get an update on each of the individual projects which are funded under this stream, just so that we get a bit more detail, because it's all in a sense lumped together in one paragraph at this point in time. It would be useful just to see where we are with each of the individual projects, if that could be done for the next meeting with the committee. That's all, convener.
Right, thank you, Stephen. I'll bring Gail in first of all, and then I'll let Stuart talk about the town and village centres. Gail.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. In relation to Gotter Water, works have started on site, and I'll get an update about the programme for that and share that with members. In relation to the car parks in Kilmacombe, the process is to have the detailed design and costs realised, so that we're able to come to council with, this is what this proposal would look like and this is what the cost would be, so that members are able to consider each of those options. And also, if one of those options was an option you wanted to progress with, consider where that project may be funded from, if you're correct in that there is no allocation currently for any construction work for a particular car park. So at the moment, the procurement would be for the detailed design and the cost elements, so that there'll be a full picture that can be shared with members.
Stuart, would you like to add anything to that?
No, you can get answer just when you answer the question.
I was just, before you come in, I just want to make sure Councillor McCabe is happy with the first part of the question. Stephen, is that okay?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. So we'll get a detailed report come to committee in due course. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Sure.
Apologies, can we answer that? Quick there, and with regards to town and village centres, happy to bring a detailed report in each of the activities as Councillor McCabe has asked for the next meeting with the committee.
Okay, thank you. So, looking at the chart, okay, Chris.
No, so somebody's coming in later on. That's what's going on.
Okay, right, because what I was doing, I was giving both yourself and Councillor McCabe, as both Glasgow councillors, the chance to mention the comment under appendix number 2 on the funding of it, because I know Stephen, yourself and the convener is very much anxious to try and get the comment moving. So I guess when we were looking at the agenda, I think this is probably the correct agenda item to actually ask officers, where are we with the whole aspect of the comment, both the removal and the possible replacement of the comment, and whether or not we can get a subsequent paper maybe to inform members more fully of where we're at in that, Stuart. So I'll let you comment first of all.
There is a comment subgroup from the Glasgow Town Centre Regeneration group, and the comment subgroup has met on a number of occasions. There isn't a firm proposal in respect of a solution in terms of a replacement for the comment, and the subgroup is looking at a number of options for it. recognising that currently the budget that's available for the comment is around about £500,000. With regards to the removal of the comment, there is a desire by the subgroup to remove the comment as it stands today, because clearly it continues to deteriorate on a sad basis. And it was our intention to bring a report before to this committee. Unfortunately, events overtook us with regards to the possibility of us being able to remove the comment. And I respect that, because clearly the longer we leave the comment in its current location, the more it deteriorates and it's sadder it looks, and that reflects on both Glasgow, its people, and indeed wider community of the.
So can we, is it your intention to bring a paper to the next Environment Regeneration Committee? I assume that this committee has got to give approval for any removal of the comment, and also there's obviously been various plans, so a future paper should not just maybe deal with the removal of the comment, but any other options we've got for the replacement of the comment and possible funding of this. Would that be fair?
In some ways, the removal of the comment, I'm tempted to say it should take place sooner rather than later. But if the committee are minded for us to bring a paper back which seeks the options as well as the removal of the comment, then that's something we can bring forward.
I'm acutely aware, although I've got strong ties to Port Glasgow, I'm no longer a councillor for there. I noticed that Councillor McCabe wants. I'll let Stephen in first, Stephen, and Chris in as the two ward councillors. So I'll let Stephen in first, Stephen.
Yeah, you took me a bit by surprise by raising this particular matter, Councillor Clougherty, but as a former Port Glasgow councillor, your intervention is appreciated. I tend to, I think, agree with what Stuart's suggesting. I don't think the removal can wait till we get a detailed paper with costed options. I think it's probably better if it's removed as soon as possible, and the funding is there to pay for the removal. And I think it would be sensible if the committee were to agree to give delegated authority to the director today to progress the removal of the comment as it stands at this point in time.
Okay, thanks so much, Stephen. Chris?
Yes, thank you for bringing the matter of comment up. It was one of the things that was on my agenda, because I did notice it was missing. I've been trying to, as chair of the Port Glasgow Regeneration Forum, I confirm with what the Mr Jameson and other colleagues have said. The decision has been made by the subgroup to move the comment respectfully and quickly, because it is deteriorating. You want to make sure we can salvage as much of the existing replica as possible, and that gives us more options when we're telling the story of the comment in future. The thing that makes the comment special, and especially in a certain regard, is the fact that it's the first commercial operating paddle steamer. So it's saving that steam engine that's the replica, which is a full size replica, which is the key thing now, as well as saving as much as we can of the original wood of the replica. So yes, if the committee is minded, I certainly would support officers having delegated authority to start the process of removing the comment before we get a paper on the actual options for the replacement, because that's something we're still deciding. There's a lot of options out there, and we have to go through a number of things, and then we have already said in the past we'll have a public consultation and try and develop the options for remembering the comment going forward with the wider Port Glasgow and Inverclyde community. Okay,
thanks for that, and thanks Stephen as well. So the Football Glasgow Council are united. It seemed like 1-4 for a time there, but that's good. Can we move on to the recommendations? There are no further questions. The recommendations at 2.1 and 2.2 with regard to Jamaica Street, and can we add a further recommendation then with regard to delegated authority to go with the removal of the comment?
Agreed.
Is that agreed?
Agreed, yeah.
Thank you, members. Can we move to addendum number 4, which strategic housing investment plan. And we have Martin. Martin, would you like to speak to this item?
Thank you, Convener. I'll just make a few general comments on this paper to start off with. Just the SHIP is obviously a rolling programme, albeit we have a new fresh iteration every year, but it is a rolling 5-year programme. So although this is the 23-28 SHIP, we'll be back next year with the 24-29 with further development. Overall, what we have seen is the appetite for development amongst both local RSLs and some of the national RSLs has been considerably diminished. And I think this is partly due to the difficulty in delivering projects, but locally also owing to concerns about displacement resulting in voids. And I think we've discussed that in committee previously. Some of these concerns we'd hope to alleviate and address through a shift of emphasis in future, looking at the new housing strategy that's currently under development, which will potentially put more emphasis on regeneration and more emphasis on specialist housing. So that, I think that will be seen in the next iteration of the SHIP. On the individual projects, currently, I won't go into every project, but I'll comment on one or two. 5.4, the Bay Street project was previously being led by Trust Housing Association. Trust have pulled out of this project and pulled out of sort of development more widely. It's not specific to this project. However, Sanctuary are currently looking at this project with the possibility of them taking it over, and we're happy for me to raise that verbally with you. And 5.5, you'll see the Strone Farm, the Oak Tree project. This one was held up by the termination of a contract. The contractor was struggling to deliver the contract. Oak Tree are currently looking at appointing a new contractor, and I'm hopeful that they will be able to complete that project. 5.6 is the Clune Park. We're currently progressing with the revised master planning for Clune Park, which will be brought to committee in due course. We are looking at a likely 2-phase project, and we think this is a sensible point to move Clune Park from the slippage programme where it was previously into the general programme, and we've had discussion with Scottish Government on that and on kind of funding options for the future. I won't go into any more detail, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Martin. I'm going to bring Colin in first, and then yourself again, almost.
Right, thanks, Jim. I mean, much of the focus of this SHIP is obviously on new builds and identifying new areas of land. But if I can just ask about the current housing stock, will we be engaging with the social landlords, or will we have any influence in how they're going to upgrade the existing stock as part of this housing plan? A lot of the current properties are fit for purpose, a lot of them are damp. So it's just to see what influence or what engagement we've had, or what we can have with the social landlords in regard to this.
Martin, do you want to come in first?
Yes, through you, Convener. This is what I was referring to round about the new local housing strategy. We've had quite a lot of general engagement with the RSLs, and the engagement's been very positive. And one of the things we are looking at is in future years using a bit more of the resource planning assumption that we get from Scottish Government, or we don't get it, but is allocated by Scottish Government to Inverclyde, potentially for regeneration projects, so that rather than new build, which can lead to displacement and voids, we are looking at whether some of that money can actually be channeled to support RSLs and actually improving estates.
Okay. I'll bring Graham in. Graham.
Thanks very much, Premier. I've got 2 points, 2 questions. So if I refer to big page 40 and big page 51, where it's on the toilet Grantham Clone, the narrative talks about the 20 units that are obviously going to be made available after the build by the private company Target, all relative to planning consent, etc., which is obviously on the narrative, it gives some information, but when I move to page back page 51 on the table, it gives more details, which is often welcomed. So it says that 20 units will be social rented or mid-market rent or new supply shared equity. I had to ask, by the way, what this is for. So I'm not clever, I would ask the question. So I just wondered if officers could give us any breakdown. Is those 20 units, is there any indication or any direction given from us in the SHIP to the builders and to the potential RSL about what that mix is between SR, MMR and NSSE? First question. Then, we'll take one thing.
Do you want me to answer that one first? Or
Yeah, answer that one first.
So yes, we have had sort of tripartite meetings with McTaggart and Mickle and with Link to look at the mix of housing and also the kind of the way that housing will be put forward. Obviously, it's affordable housing, and that's why some of it's mid-market rent. It doesn't have to be social rent. It can be shared equity, it can be mid-market rent. I don't have to hand a detailed breakdown, but of the current proposals, because it's still being worked on and it won't really be finalised until the point at which it's finalised. But what I can do, Councillor, is I'll see what the current proposals are, and I can get you a copy of those proposals.
That's helpful, thanks, Peter.
Sorry, can you list questions?
So, sorry?
When you go.
Sorry, my next question here, page 45. It talks about that we're seeking to, we're meeting the Robert Clyde homes, we will indulge in looking at the sale of land assets for private investment. So there's a small paragraph, it's the second paragraph on page 45, that talks about sort of opening up discussion on on what happened with the Robert Clyde homes and where the future goes. I'm just concerned that is a big issue, and it's a very, very small paragraph. So I'm not too sure at what stage this committee or council would get an understanding of what was meant by reopening up the stock transfer agreement. There's indication that we're going to do that, but it's quite a massive issue to do. And just to get to help me understand, is there a process involved there, and what site will we get on that process?
Martin?
So reopening the stock transfer agreement is a huge thing, and there are more than one party involved in this. There's River Clyde Homes, there's the Scottish Government, there's ourselves. Now, RCH have been interested in revisiting aspects of the stock transfer, but what we would have to do is have tripartite discussions with the Scottish Government, because, as you'll be aware, significant amounts of public money were ploughed into the stock at the point of stock transfer, and any changes to the stock transfer would have to be acceptable both to ourselves and to Scottish Government. So what I would say is we'd be quite a long way from having any concrete developments on that.
Stuart?
Through you, I would just clarify that the paragraph does say that it will, and how it aligns with the requirements of the stock transfer agreement as opposed to revisiting the stock transfer agreement, Councillor Brooks, and it relates to the asset. So there isn't a desire by officers as part of the SHIP to revisit the stock transfer agreement, because, as Martin said in his response, that would be very significant.
But there's a desire to look at how stock trade land transfer would sit alongside the current agreement.
Yes.
Yeah. That's helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, I'll bring Stephen in first of all from online, and then I think it was Chris. Stephen?
Yeah, thanks, Jim, and thanks to Graham for his keen interest in the project in my ward. I'm sure Councillor Wilson's particularly interested in that as well, having opposed the development, but c'est la vie. A few points. The first one is just the overall issue that Martin has raised in his presentation, and he talked about in his response to Colin's question. I can understand this debate that's going on, and it was part of the strategy day we had for the local housing strategy, and I can understand the rationale of it. But there might be concerns about, will we lose funding, Martin, and what guarantee is there that any affordable housing money can be used for investment in existing stock? Because we've obviously had that debate over the acquisition programme, and it's good that we're continuing to be able to use the money for the acquisition programme. But is there a danger that if we aren't investing in new build, we might get less money? That's my first question. Second question is with regard to the empty homes officer. So there's a section in the report about the empty homes officer's work. Can you confirm that we've now recruited a new empty homes officer? Because obviously we previously had a post that was shared with River Clyde Homes, but I thought it was given for the council to recruit a post. And the third question is with regard to one of the projects in the slippage programme, the police station field in Kilmacombe, which was mentioned earlier in the agenda as a potential site for a car park, I have to say. I would be useful to understand how this project has ended up in our slippage programme based on the sort of matrix that we use to determine the prioritisation of projects. Because it's, to me, it seems a bit speculative at this point in time, if I'm being generous. So it would be useful to understand how it's actually found its way into our slippage programme.
Okay, Mark.
Thank you, through you, convener. I'll start off with the funding issue. The Scottish Government's allocation of the RPA seems to have moved slightly in some of the more recent guidance, whereby they are citing that the resource planning assumption funds can be used for regeneration projects, whereas previously they were very focused on additional new homes. We have a meeting with Scottish Government tomorrow afternoon, actually, to discuss this very point, and also to talk about the kind of wider aspects of the local housing strategy. What we do get challenged on by Scottish Government, though, when we are suggesting projects or spend, in particular if we are suggesting projects that are maybe regeneration rather than new build, is we'll be challenged back to say, where in our local housing strategy does it say that that's a priority? And I think what we've seen from the early development meetings for the LHS is that generally all the RSLs are fairly united that is a significant issue for them. It's not just the one. So in terms of funding, I think that's a conversation that we need to have with Scottish Government, and we're kind of kicking off that conversation, I think, tomorrow when we talk to them about where we are in the development of our current LHS. Empty homes officer, I'm happy to confirm we have had an empty homes officer in post since the summer, and they are working on both individual private homes, but also be working with the RSLs on sort of larger issues round about voids. So yes, we do. And the last one is the police station field. Reason for putting the police station field in the slippage programme is really just to highlight that we have discussions at quite an early stage on some projects. For example, we've obviously had quite advanced discussions on the quarry site with McTaggart and Mickle and Link. These are early engagement that we've had with potential developers to say, well, if you're going to develop that, what elements of affordable housing are there going to be and how can they be delivered? So really it's at an early stage, and that's why it's in the slippage programme, but we've put it in to highlight that those discussions are taking place. And obviously this doesn't have any bearing on the actual planning process itself. It's just getting slightly ahead of the game. If the planning process leads to no development on that site, well, that's just what it will be, and it won't be in next year's SHIP.
Can I come back in, convener, just on a couple of points? So in terms of the empty homes officer, I think it would be useful to get a report, maybe towards the summer, in terms of the work of the empty homes officer and the progress that's been made. But in terms of this particular site, I have to say, as Martin and I'm sure the director will be well aware, planning matters in the area of Kilmacombe are particularly contentious, and if I was a good citizen of Kilmacombe, which I suppose I am, and I was looking at our housing investment plan, and I saw that project in our housing investment plan, I would be putting 2 and 2 together and getting 5, to be perfectly honest. So I just think there are sensitivities that we need to be aware of and understand. So I'm just forewarning you, I suppose. If we're having that in our plan, there may well be people who will be expressing concern. Are we preempting the planning process? Because you can expect there will be, and I'm not expressing a view because I'm a member of the planning board, but you can expect if there was to be a planning application coming forward for that location, which included an element of affordable housing in the project, you can bet your bottom dollar, as there has been in the past, there will be significant opposition to that particular project. So I'm just saying to you, it's that it maybe could be considered a bit premature.
What I'll do is I'll let our new corporate director comment, Stuart.
Through you, Chair. I can assure Councillor McCabe that 2 and 2 don't need funds, and that because Martin has included within the SHIP the response to the early discussions that he's had with developers, that there's no, it does not usurp the planning process, and the planning process would stand ultimately as the final determination for any application coming forward. Of course, if members are opposed to an individual site being contained within the SHIP, then that's something that they could request for officers to remove from the SHIP on the balance of the discussion that's taking place today.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. Stephen, do you get any other comments on that before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose my issue in terms of removing it from the SHIP, would that present any issues in terms of the case that we are making to the Scottish Government? If not, I do think it is premature to include it in the SHIP, to be perfectly honest. I mean, the director will be able to tell me what it's currently zoned for in terms of the local development plan, but certainly we're obviously considering at least part of that site for a public car park as well. So I personally think it is premature, but I'll seek some guidance from the director.
What I'll do, Stephen, I'll take that towards the recommendations and allow Mark to come in first and just to give some of the recommendations. I'll bring back in on it. Martin?
So I can just confirm it will have no effect whatsoever on discussions with Scottish Government. So it's immaterial. It's really there. It was there to highlight to members that there had been some discussion. So no issues with actually removing that from that table.
Okay, thanks, Martin. I'm going to bring Chris in first.
Yes, I think the good people of Kilmacombe will be quite glad to know that their councillors are quite in tune. I would certainly like to remove the police station Kilmacombe from the Slippery project because I think I can understand what the officers are saying about having early discussions. But I'm also conscious of the fact that probably a lot of that site would be contrary to the local development plan. So I'd be much more comfortable at looking at projects at early stages if we were looking at projects that were within the local development plan.
Was that your only question on it?
No, another few more.
Because I'm going to bring Councillor McCabe in when it comes to recommendations as well.
That's
Was that you?
No.
Right.
Also, with respect to the Queen Park items in the paper, well, first of all, I'd like to say I welcome the emphasis on the regeneration of the existing housing stock. I think that's very important. because we need to look from a point of view of new housing and the balance of existing housing, because a lot of existing housing stock is of good bricks and mortar quality and can be refurbished. And obviously there's of course well-developed communities that actually like these houses. We should be looking at that as well as causing a strain to those communities by building new houses all the time. So I do welcome that. With respect to Clune Park, I note paragraph 5.6 that there is discussion about appointment of an RSL as a development partner to take forward in the few years, and phase 1 and phase 2 approach. However, when we go to the table at the end of the SHIP, where it talks about the details of phase 1 and phase 2 for Clune Park, it doesn't specify that the development partner would be an RSL. I just wonder if officers would give some commentary on that, because I think from my perspective, we should keep our options open for a development partner for Clune Park Estate, because I think there's a wide options that are available. It might not necessarily be a social landlord, it could be mid-market rent, it could be, as been discussed earlier, Borough Drive. It could be other options that are available, and it could just be what they call a developer for that would be able to build aspirational homes in Glasgow as well. So I wonder if officers would be able to give a comment.
Martin?
So on Clune Park, I suppose focus has always been on a kind of mix of housing in Clune Park, and some of that might be social rent, some of it might be mid-market rent, some of it might be shared equity, and we have had discussions with Scottish Government on how that mix might work and other models that have been used elsewhere, including the possibility of some amenity housing in a shared equity basis, where previously right to buy tenants who want to downsize or move into more of a retirement situation could possibly have their properties brought back into the social housing stock. So given that it's a mix, or it's likely to be a mix, I think it's safe to say that an RSL can deliver that mix. What we can't do is we can't just put this out to tender for a build and then end up with properties on our hands, as we are not allowed to be landlords or whatever. So we would need an RSL to deliver the management of any social rent, or even mid-market rent. So I think some of the national RSLs are quite experienced in different housing mixes, and that's where our discussions have lain so far, albeit I'm entirely open to alternative suggestions, but we'd have to see them through the prism of stock transfer and the fact that we can't actually manage any housing.
Okay, Chris, I'm going to let Stuart come in first. Stuart?
Through you can hear, and Martin would probably want to add that there's the eligibility of spend against Scottish Government grant as well, that has to be factored into the end use of that grant money.
Chris, just to confirm then, effectively a lot of the options are still open with regard to going forward with Clune Park and how it actually is developed and what developer takes it forward.
I think the answer to that is yes. I'm going to bring Elizabeth in. Elizabeth?
Thanks, Convener. Couple of questions and comments from me, ranging across big pages 42 to 44, if that's okay. The first one, obviously the SHIP is quite a kind of buildings focused concrete report, but delivering the aspirations of the SHIP in reality relies a lot on communications and actually what we do in terms of the people, as well as what we're doing for place. And the first question I've got is about the homelessness side of things, and I'm looking at the paragraphs that talk about temporary accommodation becoming people's permanent accommodation. And just in terms of my experience as an elected member over the last 6 years, I kind of feel there's a bit of an issue in terms of how we communicate with people who are in that particular context, that are moved into scatter flats as a scatter flat, but then are told that that's becoming their permanent accommodation. and I'm just worried that we don't necessarily get that quite right all the time, and I'm just hoping that in terms of delivering on the aspirations of what we want to do to tackle homelessness through the SHIP, that we can sort of build in doing better in terms of how we communicate with people. That would be my first point. That's more a point than a question, really. The second one is a question, and it's about wheelchair accessible housing. Obviously, we look at the percentage, we look at the 5%. Some of us would like higher than 5%, but we know that 5% is where we have landed as a council. The question that I've got is, do we look also at the type of housing that we make wheelchair accessible in terms of the number of bedrooms that are in properties, etc. Again, anecdotally, I'm very aware that a number of the properties seem to be one-bedroom houses, which fails to realise that a lot of people who are wheelchair users live in the context of care or live in the context of family. In many more properties that are beyond one-bedroom provision. So that is a question, really. How do we look at that? And the third one I've got is about child poverty, and this is a comment. I think it's phenomenal when we get any kind of policy or any kind of plan that does look beyond its own borders and look beyond its own boundaries and says this is where we contribute to something else. And looking at the child poverty side of things, I think housing is such a fundamental aspect of tackling child poverty that I think we're actually selling ourselves short in terms of how we're expressing the contribution that we make through this SHIP to tackling child poverty. It's not just about energy efficiency and that reducing household budgets. I think there's much more that we could put in there. So a comment, if anything, would be that in terms of that, the SHIP moving beyond its own boundaries, we're selling ourselves short in terms of our contribution to child poverty.
Martin, would you like to comment?
Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button. I will endeavour to do my best. In terms of homelessness, I suppose the SHIP is discussed with homelessness services. We look at various aspects of delivery of the SHIP, including the acquisitions programme, where there may be people who are homeless who have specific need for a very specific type of home. And possibly also we'll be looking in future at how the SHIP can deliver some of the aspirations of the RRTP in terms of maybe moving to smaller supported accommodation units. And that's not beyond the bounds of the SHIP. So in terms of, not in terms of homelessness, but in terms of mental health and disability, we are looking at various different options and housing mixes at the site at the old on Regent Street, Roxburgh Street, Regent Street, the old health centre site. And we're also looking at, that ties in also with the wheelchair accessible issue, where we're also looking at kind of bariatric housing, and our discussions with the developer there have focused largely on some of the very items the councillor referred to in terms of, with wheelchair accessible housing, how many bedrooms are there? You know, is it like we can't limit it to one bedroom? Some people, as you say, have a need for support, or actually a need in certain situations for storage, but also may also have families. So that's kind of at the forefront when we're looking at the housing mix, and we are trying to use the housing partnership group, which I chair, which joins together the RSLs and the HSCP to make sure that the actual need is matched by what we are actually putting forward. And we are always, unfortunately, going to be a bit behind that because we're planning projects a few years ahead, but we're trying to align the delivery with the need, and that's certainly something we'll be looking at in Clune Park. In terms of child poverty, just say, all I can really say is we'll take your comments on board, councillor, and look at how we can make that, include that better. Largely, though, the format of the SHIP follows Scottish Government guidance, but that doesn't stop us adding in extra sections. So I'm happy to take advice on that, and I think there's a meeting of the Child Poverty Action Group as we speak, and we can maybe look at next year at feeding some of that in.
Okay, thanks. Lisa?
That's really helpful. I think probably moving forward is something, that last paragraph on big page 42, that flipping properties from temporary accommodation to permanent accommodation is something I would want us to kind of have a particular eye on as people who care for people who are vulnerable in Inverclyde.
Before I bring Colin in, it's probably a good time to raise a comment to me, because it's on homelessness as well. And that is on the very last paragraph, Martin, where we talk about considering further housing actions to address homelessness through discussions with owners of currently empty houses, increasing access to private rented sector by working with them, with private landlords, and investigating a programme of leasing private rented tenancies. Now, for me, it sort of rings alarm bells with me, because part of the big issues we've got, especially in areas like the town centre of Aquino and areas like that, has been with private landlords, and I hate to say it, tenants of private landlords, and that relationship that we've got with them, and the relationship that sometimes breaks down. And I'm a wee bit concerned with that paragraph, that all we're going to do is exacerbate a problem that's already there. So it's probably really just a comment on it. It's just that working with private landlords rather than working with RSLs seems, and I know we are working with RSLs as well, but putting that in specifically with regard to private landlords sort of rang a wee bit alarm bells with us. So I don't know if you want to, if there's anything you can say to allay my fears on that.
I'm happy to try. In terms of kind of homelessness, obviously we have discussions with homelessness about the various different options available to homeless people, and homelessness services are keen that different housing options are available to people, and we're not putting everybody down exactly the same channel, which might not be a good fit for everybody. And from that perspective, we don't want to discount private landlords. However, that's not necessarily going to be the principal area of focus for us. And again, that's largely driven by homelessness services rather than ourselves in housing strategy. In terms of the other comment about tenancy flipping, I think flipping tenancies is an attempt to get people, once they have actually moved into a scatter flat and are comfortable there, getting them a secure tenancy so that they have a long-term future there. Now, it doesn't mean that they should necessarily be trapped there or it's their only option. And I'm happy to take that point back to homelessness services, but it's the idea of tenancy flipping is supposed to be positive rather than negative, that it's actually giving people a secure tenancy long term rather than a temporary housing option.
Okay.
Thanks. I would like a wee spotlight put on that though, because I'm not sure. I think the chat is sometimes happening rather than the security. Okay,
can you take Councillor Robertson's comments on board, Mark?
I certainly will, and I'll take those back to our discussions at the Housing Partnership Group.
And I think the last comment in this is going to be from Councillor Jackson. Paul?
Yeah, it's just a quick one, Jim, and it's on what Elizabeth says about wheelchair accessible housing. I'm going to give you a quick example, and that's of Ravenscraig, where a new build can be adapted within 1 year. So we've actually got a position where you have people in wheelchairs who are applying for houses, a new built house, who can't actually get them, because even though they're in wheelchairs, they might have other issues where they need to get in and have adaptations done within the house. Could be kitchen, could be bathrooms, showers, etc. So this 5% to enable people in wheelchairs to get houses, it's not as black and white as it is, because there are people in wheelchairs who aren't getting houses for the simple fact that these houses aren't adaptable. So you could apply, you could be in a wheelchair, apply for a house which is wheelchair adapted, but the rest of the house isn't adapted, and people in wheelchairs are being refused, actively being refused houses at the minute because of this 1 year defects contract which says you can't amend a house within 1 year. So there's people actually losing out because of this, and it's something we should be able to look at in the future. Thanks, Jim.
Martin, do you want to comment?
I'm happy to take that back and have a discussion with the relevant developers on that, because yes, that's not an issue that I was aware of. I can kind of understand it's probably to do with the actual warranty from the builders who are contracted to build the houses. But yes, that would be a concern, and I'm happy to take that away.
Thanks, Jack.
Now, I'm going to go to recommendations, and I think Councillor McCabe's going to move.
I would like to propose, in addition to the recommendations that are before us, that we do agree to remove the police station field from the Slippies programme, because at this stage it's premature to include that in the programme.
Okay. Is there anybody against that?
I wholeheartedly agree.
Okay. So with that, that's the recommendations. Can we agree?
Agree.
Thank you. And again, can we move on to agenda item number 5, which is the landlord registration update? Again, a paper extremely waited for. Martin.
Thank you, convener. This is an update report on progress on landlord registration and the enforcement options available to the council when we have issues with private landlords' performance. Section 4 of the report updates on the current status and the use of different means of engaging landlords, including improvement plans and rent penalty notices, which we found to be very successful in many circumstances, albeit they're not a panacea for all others, as they depend on, I suppose, feedback from the tenants, and we recognise that sometimes the relationship between landlords and tenants is asymmetric. Section 5 covers a revised process for consideration of landlords under the fit and proper person process. Currently, the service is pulling together evidence concerning one landlord with a view to a hearing at the Housing Landlord Registration Subcommittee. There's a need, however, to regularise the process for meetings of that subcommittee, and the service is working with legal and democratic services to bottom out this process. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Martin. Elizabeth.
Thanks, Convener. It does seem a bit of honesty, complete honesty. I find it a bit odd that we haven't met, as the subcommittee hasn't met, to be honest. Similarly to our general purposes board or our licensing board, where we've got liquor licence premises that we keep an eye on. We've got general purposes board for taxi licences and things like that, and we make sure that everything's kind of going okay there. We've got a system whereby there's a threshold under which officers can do things by delegated authority, and then things get escalated to us. And I'm struggling to kind of see why we haven't operated the same system routinely in terms of landlord registration. Firstly, as a matter of transparency. Secondly, because we know there are issues with some landlords. And thirdly, as a kind of protection for our officers in terms of them not dealing with everything themselves and things actually coming to us who are the elected people for the people that we've elected.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Martin, would you like to comment? And then I'll bring Councillor.
I suppose, to be perfectly honest, that kind of reflects some of the internal discussions we've had ourselves. That landlord registration came in, when landlord registration came in, it was a complete mess. And there were issues with the technology, there were issues with the register. There was a lot of legwork had to be done. And to be fair, we've never properly regularised the process. And I think that's what we need to do to address Councillor Robertson's concerns. And I think, yes, that's something that we are aware of, and that's a position that we want to be in. I would stress, however, that it is a registration scheme. It's not a licensing scheme, so it's not an absolute parallel with other licensing as covered by the General Purposes Board.
So bear in mind Councillor Robertson's comments. Is this virtually a holding paper then, Martin? Is that what you're saying to us?
Yes, we do need to work out how we are actually going to engage the subcommittee properly, and how we will bring reports forward to it. And I would like that to be a position where it's an understandable process for all members, so that it's clear where we will do it and when. And I think that's where we want to be, and we'll hopefully be bringing a report back on that in due course.
Elizabeth, is that okay?
not really, I'm kind of just aware of the recommendations at the minute, just say that we're noting. I would like to see some action sort of articulated as the recommendation from today's meeting. Again, I'm aware that, you know, a year ago we put people onto this subcommittee. 5 years ago we put other people onto this subcommittee. It's a subcommittee that's been in existence. We should know how it should be operating.
So Mark, I guess the key from that is, if members are noting this, can we expect another paper back quickly?
Very quickly.
I think we're happy to bring a paper back. Probably, I'm happy to have further discussions with Legal and Democratic Services and bring a paper back to the next meeting if that suits.
Yeah. Okay. I think that'll probably suit. I'm not going to list it because obviously the recommendations to know what we'll add in to get a paper in front of me. Colin.
Thanks, Jim. Elizabeth, completely agree with you and everything you're saying there. I had noticed to the Labour group when we decided we had spoken about this, we were a little concerned, and this is why we asked for this update on this. If we're going to be bringing another paper back, Jim, I'd kind of, I know it's a bit kind of, you know, semantics, but I'd like to be a bit more clearer in what would make someone not a fit and proper person to be a landlord. I mean, it mentions criminality in here. You know, we do have situations where you have somebody who might not be deemed a fit and proper landlord who would then put the property in the name of a spouse or a partner or a business colleague. So if I bring another report back, I would like a wee bit more clarity on what is actually someone who's not a fit and proper person. Thank you.
Martin, can you take Councillor Jackson's comments when you're doing that? And I'm going to, I noticed that Ian Stratton's want to come in briefly, so I'll bring in a legal person. Ian, you want to comment?
Thanks. I mean, I was just going to briefly, I will briefly on that, but just to sort of echo what sort of Martin had said, and I know that members do have concerns about this and the manner in which some landlords might be operating, from discussions myself and Martin have had with a number of councillors. So we wanted to bring this report to put out there, give some understanding of the current position, but I suppose understanding that members might wish more. So that this feedback is very helpful. So we will of course take that away and bring something back, and we can put into that a bit more detail around fit and proper. Some members will be familiar with that concept in terms of, for instance, taxi drivers under the General Purposes Board. And so we can put a bit more of that in to hopefully provide a bit more assistance around that, certainly.
Okay, thanks for that, Ian. I've taken Elizabeth's comments and Colin's comments, my own comments. Can we agree the recommendation, however, put in that we'll have a further paper with regard to the comments that members have made at this meeting, to have a more fuller appraisal of the landlord registration scheme? Is that okay, Chris?
I think it's important that we maybe get something that we can actually then action and improve at the next one as well.
Yeah.
Because we want to have something we can say, yeah, let's move, let's change.
Yeah.
We want a new procedure we can actually.
Yeah.
There might be a discussion we have to have between now and then and developing it, and maybe officers can have discussions with other officers and other local authorities, because we don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel, but let's look and get something that we can actually move forward on.
Yeah, so take Chris's point and board, the next paper should be an approval paper, not just a motion.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. And with those comments, can we agree the paper?
Agreed.
Okay. Can we move on to agenda item number 6, which was Stuart's general update? Stuart.
Through the chair. A long outstanding agreement is the update in the group to the Union for Credit Ferry project, the content of which is contained between paragraphs 3.1 and 3.6. And the second item in the report is simply for noting that the temporary arrangements in respect of the ground utility manager, who is part of the shared service solution, has been extended to the 31st of March 2023. Which.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. I've got Stephen first, and then Elizabeth. Stephen.
Yeah, I don't have actually a question on the two items that are in this particular report, convener, but if you'll indulge me, given the announcement that Amazon are consulting on the closure of their plant in Gourock, I think it would be pertinent, and I can't find another place in the agenda to raise this particular issue, but I think it would be pertinent if we had an update from the director in terms of what we are doing as a council and our partners are doing to respond to this particular situation. Obviously, you may want to take questions on the other items before allowing Stuart to do that, but I would certainly crave your indulgence for us to have that update.
But no, I think what we'll do is we'll have that brief update first, because I know Stuart was hoping to bring it to the full council once the more flesh and the bones type of thing. But Stuart, I'll let you comment. And I'm happy to indulge you as ever, Stephen.
Thank you, Convener.
Stuart.
Through you, Convener. In terms of our engagement, Councillor McCabe, we've attempted to engage with Amazon through the lead partner for PACE, which is Partnership Action for Continuous Employment, Where Skills Develop Scotland. The company have indicated to us that, or indicated to SDS that because of the consultation period that's underway, they're not able to share with us the details of those affected until the end of the consultation period. We are trying a number of initiatives to try and get that information, because obviously the headline figure is 300 people. What we want to understand is how many of those 300 people are from Inverclyde, and how can we maximise the interventions to support those people who are at Amazon and working in Inverclyde and are likely to be displaced. We are trying through, as I say, a variety of methods to try and engage with the company, but there has been no engagement to date. With regards to the premises, we're not taking any action on the premises because clearly, primarily, our focus is about addressing the needs of the up to 300 people who are living in Inverclyde. We hope to be able to bring a fuller report to the full council once we've had hopefully got engagement with Amazon by that stage, in order that we can brief members appropriately then.
Okay, Steve.
Yeah, thanks for
that. Elizabeth?
Convener, my question seems very trifling in comparison to that particular question there. Stuart just said that this ground service manager was extended until 31st of March, and the paper says May.
Sorry,
is it May?
It's my mistake.
It is May. Right, okay, that was all. Thank you.
I'm looking at Patsy and online. Any questions from any members? No, can we agree with paper?
Agreed.
Thank you. We move to agenda item number 6, which is the participation in the Edinburgh process and declaration. Stuart.
The Edinburgh Protest and Declaration are a global partnership which seeks to amplify the voice of biodiversity. The initiative led by the Scottish Government on behalf of the UN Convention for Biological Diversity is something which we as a council have been watching group since its inception. However, by becoming a signatory at this stage in time, it acknowledges the work of another 273 signatories, including the majority of Scotland's local authorities. Affords learning opportunities as well as the possibility of additional funding sources for biodiversity, and I'm happy to begin.
Thank you for the questions. Chris first.
Thank you. I think I do welcome this, as you know, as a practice. Yeah, well, at least I'm consistent. I think what they got is important that we do all we can as an organisation to help the environment and to do our bit, and to, as it says here, for living in harmony with nature, which is very important if we want to gift or present the planet to the next few generations. Now, looking at this, one of the comments I have is on relation to access to funding. Can officers give us assurance that we haven't missed out on any funding applications so far by not signing the declaration?
Sure.
I'm not aware of not having access to any funding, because clearly the council's benefited from funding sources such as the Nature Restoration Fund. We're currently preparing bids for the Nature Restoration Fund for next year. So I'm not aware of anything, but what this does is it ensures that we have full access to any funds which are available to us.
Okay,
thank you for that clarification.
Any other questions? Can't see anything on the chat and nothing in the chamber. Can we agree on the recommendation?
Convener, could I just briefly come in?
Oh, sorry, Stephen, yes, by all means.
Yeah, the recommendation obviously is to remit this to the council, full council for endorsement. I think it's important when it is presented to the full council that the actual full Edinburgh declaration is included in the papers rather than an electronic link to the declaration. I just think if we're asking the council to sign up, we should present the actual document to the council for agreement.
I think Stuart will take that forward. So in order to fully make sure we look after the global diversity.
That signifies the importance of it. Sometimes paper is important sometimes.
Very passionate. Okay, good.
Thank you. Just happy receiving you again for things.
Thanks, Bob. Stuart's followed the World Cup in half the trees.
Top man.
With that, we move on to agenda item number 8. And can I firstly, without the anything that's happening with the paper, can I firstly thank Gail and Gordon Leach for meeting board members. It was much appreciated and dialogue was much appreciated. And so with that in mind, can we go on to present those? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, committee may recall that officers presented a paper that identified these two locations, and we were requested to meet with board members to consider the proposal of the traffic calming measures for Newark and Union Street. This meeting took place, and the report sets out the alternative methods that could be considered and the recommended proposal of line signing and 3 roundabouts. The report also contains the current priority list, and it's attached as requested. An annual review is carried out of all the locations. So this list is a moment in time because the priority list may change when those further assessments are carried out. I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Stephen. Graham?
Yeah, thanks very much. I associate myself with the fact that we have this report. It's welcomed. Community Council last night welcomed information before us. What I'd like to ask Gail is, because obviously traffic calming priorities is obviously, there's many tools in your toolbox. I'm not sure the technical terms for it. We could put traffic lights on every junction and we could do it West End, which would do something for somebody, but it'd be a real challenge for elected members. But that'd certainly be, I would suggest, the best traffic calming measure. That would slow all the traffic down as they approach red lights every 100 yards. So there's also a variety of tools in your toolbox. The 2.3 has suggested that we're going to do 3 mini roundabouts on York Street, and we're going to do signs and lines on Union Street. And again, with the thank the officers that we're now going to go out on a consultation with the TRO, so I believe technically isn't necessary, but we'll agree that, which means the public will have an opinion. What the public want an opinion on is all the tools in your toolbox. All we have an opinion on is what the council is recommending. I keep thinking a bad thing. So I'm just digging to find out how can we give the public as much information as possible. So if they suggest that they don't want 3 mini roundabouts and signs and lines, maybe they want traffic lights in every corner. Obviously that's a joke. But how can they get the information of the alternatives to what we propose? Because the TRO is quite a blunt instrument. I don't know if legal would agree. It's either yes or no, the TRO. They don't, it's hard for the general public to turn around and give their alternatives to traffic calming measures.
Thank you, Councillor, to the Chair. The traffic calming policy sets out a number of alternative proposals that would be considered by officers, and officers will consider what they believe, using their technical knowledge and skills, is the best recommendation for that location. So they will look at a number of different measures, number of pedestrians in the area, where cars are parked, where the location is that maybe has the most challenge. So they will consider that full area, they consider all the potential measures that could be used, and they make a recommendation based on an assessment. And although the TRO does not allow for A, B or C, this is the proposal. Members of the public do have the opportunity at that stage to say in their representation, actually, I don't believe that's right, I think it should be, say, a speed hump or something. Then officers at that point would consider that and write back out to that representation. So there is a process in place that allows that communication to take place, but the recommendation that goes within the traffic regulation order is what has been assessed by officers using their skills and knowledge, and that's why that is the proposal. So it's very difficult to be able to provide in that format lots of different choices, and it wouldn't be appropriate.
Okay, thanks very much. But can I suggest then that community councils will obviously consult with the TROs, and as much information as members around the table we should have access to, so we can take community councils and allow the widest public discussion. Is there ever a time when a traffic calming priority is done steps? So an example would be, Union Street and York Street to do signs and lines. And if the traffic calms, then job done. If the traffic doesn't calm, then 3 roundabouts might be required. I'm just interested in officers' opinion on why that wasn't a suggestion, that a 2-step traffic calming procedure.
Thank you, Councillor, through you, Chair. Officers will always consider what the appropriate phasing is, and at this time officers believe that all the measures are required to provide the speed calming that has been identified at this location. So we have in previous times done phase introduction, and we monitor, because we don't want to put too much in a place. We don't, we don't want to have too many signs, too much lines, that clutter. So as a rule, we look to install the minimum required that will give the required impact. And on this occasion, it's felt by officers that this is the minimum that's required to have that impact of reduction in speed.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Karina, and thank you again for meeting with us and for agreeing a public consultation when it's not a statutory requirement. I think we genuinely do appreciate that. Given that it's not a statutory requirement and it's something that's been done because we've asked for it, really, I'm just wondering what the kind of process is in terms of it. What is the kind of, and this is purely hypotheticals I'm talking now, what would be the threshold of response from the people of the West End of Greenock or anywhere else about this particular proposal that would have any impact on it going ahead or not? Because it's not set out in statute, if you know what I mean. So if 27 million people came back and went, no, please don't do this, we're going to not do it, or I guess the point I'm saying is if we go out to consultation, we need to consult for a reason, and if there's no potential for this to not happen or be changed on the basis of the consultation, then it's perhaps tokenistic. So what would be the threshold for anything differing as a result of the consultation?
Yeah. I'll maybe have Peter to provide some clarification. My understanding is it will follow the same process as the traffic regulation order process, because it is a statutory consultation. Although we aren't required to do this, it is not something that we're not permitted to do. So though we believe we don't necessarily have to do it, it is permitted to do it. So we would follow the same process. So if we receive a number of objections, as per the usual process, we would write out to them, to the representations. We would, with our response, we'd ask them if they wish to maintain their objection. As per some of the reports later in this meeting, we would then, if we do maintain their objection, we would then look to come to this committee as an advised committee and advise committee that there needed to be a special hearing or whatever was appropriate, depending on what those objections that we received. Okay. But I don't know if Peter has anything to add.
So through you, convener, I think you've done the gun on me and you've answered much more concisely and clearly than I would have done. So basically, as a matter of good practice, if you've opened the door in that consultation process, then you should follow it through as if it was the statutory process you were following. So I'm assuming that that's the approach the officer would take. So if there was no objection, you would deal with it. But if there are objections, then you would bring it back.
Can I?
No, that's just really helpful, because like the last thing, none of us wanted it to be something that we did just to be tokenistic. So it's really helpful to kind of have kind of say that there is a route, there's a process that's there, that the people of the area, if they have something to say, it can be heard, and there's a process and way that can be done. So it's really, really helpful to have clarified that. Thank you.
Okay, can I bring Stephen in? Councillor McKay?
Yeah, I was very hesitant to ask to speak in this matter and encroach on the territory of Councillor Brooks. But my question's more or less been answered, because I was trying to understand the difference between this consultation and the statutory consultation, but it's been explained that you're going to run it as a statutory consultation. But I don't know whether that does provide some flexibility, like, for example, allowing officers to go to the community council meeting and actually present the proposals and take questions on them. I don't know if it allows that, but I think the question's more or less been answered.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Chris?
Yeah, just moving on to the other part of the paper, I think I just wanted to thank officers for bringing in the list. I think it's quite important to show the efforts that our officers do go through with respect to looking at the concerns of both elected members and the general population when these things are raised. One thing that struck me when looking at it is that these are effectively the surveys from over the last 3 years. So effectively this is a 3-year list, this is not a 30-year list. So it just shows you that the work that's involved. But leading on to that, I just wanted to say, for the management of this, obviously the officers, time, etc. Though these are effectively the top 20 are only ever looked at every 3 years, and the rest of it will fall off. Do we get a lot of repeat requests coming in? Effectively, we're looking at which street comes in time and time again, or is it a case of once it's done, people get the numbers and people are satisfied that it doesn't actually need traffic calming? What's the sort of the general process involved in this?
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor, for you, Chair. It really depends on the location. So if there has been a traffic count done in a particular period of time and there's been no change in the vicinity, so say there's been a new school built, or there's a new shop or a clinic or something, that's a change in that environment, so we would redo the assessment. But if there's been no change and it's within a particular period of time, then we wouldn't redo it. We would then write out to whoever has written to us asking for that. We would explain what the previous assessment said and what whether the assessment had put it in a priority that looked like it would be delivered in, I don't know, a year, 3 years, or potentially too far down the list to be given a sort of a date as such. So that tends to be the rule of thumb.
Yeah, so it's not as if we don't lose all record of this. We still keep all this and we still refer to it. And we still keep the memory of these things, so we're not revisiting things again and again and again every 3 years. That's great.
Okay. Can't see any other questions on the chart. Can we have any recommendations? Okay, thank you. Can we move to agenda item number 9, which is the post street name and numbering tracking scheme for number 5. Stuart.
Engineer, for you, the 805 council have not charged for this service. It is an administrative function which is required when a development has a new site. Because of the cost pressures which were under this local authority, we believe that now is the right time to introduce this charge. And happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. Councillor in the chat. May I give a recommendation? Okay, thank you. We move to agenda item number 10, which is Port Lancer and Kilmore waiting and loading traffic regulation order. Dave.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this report is to request approval to appoint a reporter to hear the representation received in relation to the Port Glasgow and Kilmore TRO. So the report sets out the objections that have been received and seek approval to proceed.
Any questions?
Let's so the recommendation by the computer. I want to take with there's an or at Article B. Is that what I was going to say? Yeah. So I'm happy to move that we move the reporter, which is in the second point of Friday.
Thank you. Chris, is that you? Somebody else?
No, I think we would generally, we generally do this as a committee. I think I'm not sure if there's any special circumstances, maybe it's revised, but I think generally, I think we should do this as a committee, especially in this committee. So I'd have amendment to do that.
Stuart, you want to come in?
Yeah, review. Because of the involvement with the elected member, it was felt that it was appropriate to go to a full report on this based on the fact.
All right.
Natural justice.
All right, I will. That's fine. That's
okay.
I'll do it.
Can't see any other questions. Chris, that drops to you, and we agree.
We now know it wasn't Chris that's the elected member. It's certainly an objection.
We won't ask who it was.
No, we don't need to. So can we actually create recommendations that this goes to the reporter?
Yeah.
And can we go to the next one, and that's West Blackwall Street, maintained directions. Again, this is going to be similar, Gail.
Yes, Chair, you're correct. This report is very similar to the previous that request approval to appoint the independent reporter to hear the consider the objections. And that is partly because of the fact that this project's actually being promoted and part funded by the council.
Looking for questions. Chris first, and then yourself, Kim. That's okay.
No, sorry, that was a legacy.
Okay.
It's just a question on the 5k for reporters. Are these standard fees? Or why is it always 5k for a reporter? And who's taking bucks here? Because that's quite a lot of money.
Usually it's 10k.
Get it half price. You?
It's councillor and sure it's just the cost that we are advised. So by the independent reporter, so I assume it covers their running costs and their overheads.
Yeah, new job. Thank you, Camilla.
When you say you need a new job,
It's just a job, I hold office here for employment.
Well, the suggestion you gave was 4 years university training and when it's got to get a charge of the institution, then you might be able to do it.
Right, okay.
Can we,
I apologise.
sorry, I've been a bit suspicious.
Your committee's losing focus, convener.
Thank you, Michael. It's on Councillor McCormick's absence. I'm taking leave of my senses. Can we agree the recommendation to pay for the can we move to agenda item number 12, which is the memorial bench review? Gail, will you start off on this?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this report has been carried out following a review of the memorial bench policy by the service, and it reflects on the availability of locations for further benches and the condition of a number of the memorial benches as well. So reflecting upon the policy and the findings, it's proposed that the memorial bench progress is expanded. So this we're looking at the number of memorial benches that we have currently, the condition of those, and potentially no longer permitting any further memorial benches. So we're proposing that memorial benches within our 3 cemeteries and our crematorium are permitted to facilitate 10 plaques. So people will be able to purchase a plaque and they will be sited on the memorial bench. This allows a place for remembrance and a place to come and visit. And it's also considered to develop the memorial walls within our 3 cemeteries and crematorium as well. And any proposal in relation to the extension of those walls will be brought to this committee for consideration. As an alternative, it's proposed that residents will be able to purchase a memorial tree with a plaque, and requested locations will be considered for the suitability and also the appropriate species of tree that will be cited, and that will have a plaque located at a tree that the condition will be monitored for a period of time to ensure that it survives and it's there for a long time. So the costs are included in the report for consideration. It includes the current cost for a bench, but also includes what the proposed cost would be for memorial trees, the plaque on a bench, but also a plaque on the memorial wall. So happy to take questions.
Okay, thanks, Gail. I mean, I realise this could be a thorny paper, but I recognise when you walk through and apply, you recognise that something probably has to be done, but I'll open up to questions. Any questions from members in the hall? Chris?
It's just a bit of clarity, really. As I say, it's a sensitive subject, and I'm glad officers thought with that. What is seems to be a reasonable solution, especially with respect to the memorial trees, which obviously gives quite a longer lasting memorial to people than a bench. I just want to confirm that it talks about the expansion memorial bench plaques. I take it that would mean that these benches would be still available in say public places like parks, etc. But it would be a number of plaques on a single bench as opposed to one plaque per bench.
So on the benches that are already in locations within parks, etc., it wouldn't be on those benches, it would be in the benches that were in cemeteries and at the crematorium. So they would be the particular benches that you would be able to have your memorial plaque placed on.
Thank you for confirming that. So it would only be in cemeteries and places for remembrance they would have the opportunity to put plaques on.
Yes, good.
Yeah, it's obviously no audit report, and happy to agree what's confirmed us. That my question was, so with Carigos, so these are now charges that we're now adding, obviously, how long we're going to have them. And in the case of the council put charges up by 3% of the budget, these cases they all fit into the charging process of the council. So just be understanding this is just these will go up year on year should the council choose to increase their charges.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Through the chair, there would be consideration annually on whether those charges would go up, and that would be a decision for council to make.
Okay, great. Thanks again online. Can we agree the recommendations? Can we move to the next items and now going into the 3 items for voting? What I would intend to do is go through these, and if any members get any questions, we've got officers available for them. So I intend to go through them, and if there's any questions, I'll bring the relevant officer in. So the first one is the property asset management, former Glenveagh Children's Centre. Do we have any questions for Edith? No, can we agree the recommendation? The next one is again contract awards from April 2022 to September 2022. Do we have any questions? Can we agree the paper?
Agree.
The next is road naming, new development in the site of the former McPherson Centre, Europe. Again, looking to see if we have any questions. Do we have any questions? Can't see anything online, anything in the room. Can we agree the recommendation?
Agreed.
And again, number 16 is a proposed retail termination order in Longshore. Again, do we have any questions? Can we agree the recommendation?
Agreed.
Now, Peter, you're right. We're now at agenda item number 7B,
Convener,
which is, can we move to?
Convener, I'm going to ask for your indulgence if that's okay as well. Can I go back to agenda item 14 and declare an interest? Actually, declared in the beginning. Financial fitness is mentioned on that particular list, and I'm on the board of financial fitness, so I should have that included in my interest. And apologies for not coming up for now.
We'll make sure when. Yeah, we're going to get a note of that.